Prisons are supposed to keep the worst of society locked away. But the truth is, some of the darkest things inside those walls were never put there by the justice system. From shadows that creep through cell blocks, to inmates who swear they were never truly alone in their cells, these places are filled with screams that no one wants to hear. And tonight, you will hear them. These are 10 true horror stories from American prisons that will change the way you think about what happens when the doors slam shut and the lights go out. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there right now. I want to know who is watching in the light of day and who is watching this deep in the night. Story 1. The Hole at Mansfield Reformatory. Mansfield Reformatory in Ohio was known for punishment. The worst of those punishments was the Hole, a solitary confinement cell where men were placed in complete darkness for days. No sound, no light, nothing. An inmate named Thomas said he was put inside the Hole for fighting. Within hours, he began to hear breathing. At first, he thought it was another man, maybe shoved in beside him. But when he reached into the blackness, there was nothing but damp stone walls. The breathing grew louder, closer. He swore he felt a hand wrap around his ankle. Cold, too cold to belong to anything alive. He kicked wildly until he lost consciousness. Guards dragged him out 2 days later. Years later, construction workers repairing the old prison found claw marks in the walls of the Hole. Some were deep, as if carved with something sharp. Others looked fresh, like someone had been scratching from the inside not long ago. But the prison had been abandoned for years. Story 2. The Crying Man of Alcatraz. Alcatraz is famous for being escape-proof, but no one ever talks about the souls who never left. In the 1940s, guards reported hearing a man crying in cell block C. It was so real that they unlocked the cell, expecting to find an inmate on his knees. The cell was empty. The crying returned night after night, sometimes soft, sometimes broken into loud sobs that carried down the hall. It always ended the same way, with a scream that rattled the walls. Tourists today say the same thing. They walk past cell block C, and suddenly the air grows heavy. They hear crying behind the bars. Some even say it sounds like the man is begging for his mother. The records show a prisoner was beaten to death in that block, his skull crushed after he was left to rot. If you visit today, some say you will hear him too, crying, begging, and then screaming. Story 3. The Burning Guard of Angola Prison. Louisiana State Penitentiary, better known as Angola, sits on land that was once a plantation. Generations of suffering are buried in its soil. In the 1950s, a guard was attacked in the fields by a group of inmates. He was beaten and set on fire. His body burned so badly that even his family could not recognize him. Decades later, guards began reporting something strange. While patrolling the edges of the fields at night, they saw a man in uniform. He was walking the line silently, his body engulfed in flames. The fire gave off no heat, and his footsteps left no sound. One rookie tried to approach. The burning man stopped, turned his head, and simply vanished into the night. Older guards told him never to follow the fire. They said every time someone did, that person was dead within the year. Story 4. The Whistling Killer at San Quentin. San Quentin in California is one of the most violent prisons in America. Inmates whisper about the Whistler, a killer executed in the 1940s. Before he stabbed his victims, he whistled the same tune, a soft nursery rhyme that echoed in their heads until the blade struck. After his death, the tune never left. Guards on patrol heard it drifting down the cell blocks at night. Prisoners froze when it reached their ears, their faces pale, their voices trembling as they begged not to be moved to that wing. One guard followed the sound late one night. His flashlight shook in his hand as he turned the corner. He saw a man's silhouette in the dark, lips pursed. The whistling was clear. He raised his light, but when the beam touched the figure, there was nothing there. Only the tune, fading into silence. Story 5. The Screams of Eastern State Penitentiary. Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia was built on the idea of silence. Prisoners were kept in solitary for months or even years, forced to confront their thoughts. Many went insane. Even now, visitors walk the crumbling halls and hear it. Screams. Not one voice, but many. Long, drawn-out wails that echo through empty corridors. Investigators once left audio equipment in cell block 12. The playback was chilling. Dozens of voices. Some crying, some shouting, some begging for mercy. The screams overlapped like a crowd of souls trapped together, desperate to escape. The prison closed in 1971, but those voices never left. Story 6. The prisoner who never left Brushy Mountain. Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary in Tennessee was built for men who had nothing to lose. One of them was called the Butcher. Convicted of brutal murders, he promised he would never leave the prison alive or dead. When he died, guards sighed with relief, but that relief did not last. Inmates soon reported seeing him pacing the yard at night, his head tilted slightly to one side, his eyes following them from the shadows. Years after the prison closed in 2009, tourists still say they see him during guided tours. A heavy figure in prison stripes standing in the yard, staring in silence. The Butcher kept his promise. Story 7. The blood-stained floor of Joliet Prison. Joliet Prison in Illinois saw constant violence. One cell was so cursed that nearly every inmate who stayed there died violently. Some hanged themselves. Others were killed by rivals. Guards tried to scrub the floor again and again, but no matter how much bleach they used, a dark red stain always returned. Some said it was rust. Others said it was blood. One janitor quit after mopping the floor and watching the stain spread under his brush. It formed the shape of a face, a twisted mouth, hollow eyes staring up at him from the stone. He left his bucket behind and never came back. Story 8. The Man in Shackles at Sing Sing. Sing Sing Prison in New York is famous for its executions. More than 600 men died in its electric chair. One night a guard was patrolling when he saw a man sitting in that very chair. His wrists were bound. His head drooped forward. The guard thought someone was playing a trick. But when he stepped closer, the figure raised its head. The face was gone. Nothing but hollow sockets where eyes should have been. The guard fainted where he stood. When he woke, the chair was empty, but the smell of burned flesh filled the room. Story 9. The Halls of Rikers Island. Rikers Island in New York is one of the most dangerous jails in the country. But what some inmates fear most is not each other. It is something they call the Faceless Man. Prisoners locked in solitary complain that at night, they hear footsteps pacing the hall. When they look through the slot in the door, they see him, a man in black with no face, just smooth skin where his features should be. One inmate clawed his own eyes out, screaming that the Faceless Man was staring at him through the door. Guards dismissed it as madness, but too many inmates described the same figure. Too many to be a coincidence. Story 10. The Forgotten Prisoner of West Virginia Penitentiary. The West Virginia Penitentiary was overcrowded and violent. Records show one prisoner simply vanished. No transfer, no release. His name disappeared. But inmates swore they heard him, crying out for food, banging against the bars. Guards checked, but the cell was chained shut with no keyhole. Decades later, during renovations, workers opened that cell. Inside were rusted shackles bolted to the wall. The plaster was covered in scratch marks, hundreds of them, running from floor to ceiling. Someone had been trying to claw their way out, long after the cell had been sealed. Story 11. The Nurse of Attica. Attica Correctional Facility in New York is remembered for the bloody riot of 1971. But long before that, inmates whispered about the nurse. Men in the infirmary claimed that late at night a woman in a crisp white uniform would appear at their bedsides. She did not speak. She carried no medicine. Her hands were always ice cold. One prisoner said she pressed her palm against his chest, and when she did, he felt his heartbeat stop for a moment. Next morning, he was dead. Guards dismissed it as coincidence, until another inmate told the exact same story, and then another. Even today, some guards refuse to walk past the infirmary after midnight. They say the nurse waits there, her pale face shining under the flicker of fluorescent light, looking for her next patient. Story 12. The hanging shadow of Leavenworth. Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary in Kansas is one of the oldest federal prisons in America. In its early days, executions were carried out by hanging. Prisoners began reporting a shadow moving across the yard wall at night. It was shaped like a man with a rope around his neck. The strange part was that no one stood there to cast it. The gallows had been torn down decades earlier. One guard tried to follow the shadow as it slid along the wall. It led him all the way to an empty corner, where it stopped. He swore he saw the shadow swing slowly, back and forth, like a body twisting at the end of a rope. He resigned 2 weeks later, and never came back. Story 13, the cell that never stays locked. In a small county jail in Texas, there is one cell that refuses to stay locked. Guards would shut the door, turn the key, and check it twice. Minutes later, it would be wide open again. One night, an inmate was placed inside that cell. The guards joked about it, saying he had company. By morning, the inmate was gone. His body was found in the shower area. His neck was snapped. There were no cameras in that wing, and no other inmates admitted to being involved. After that night, the cell was sealed shut with a steel plate. But even now, officers walking past claim they hear the door creak open from the other side. Story 14. The Red Eyes of Folsom Prison. Folsom Prison in California is infamous for its violence. Inmates talk about the red eyes. They appear late at night at the far end of the hallway, glowing faintly in the dark. One prisoner said he woke to find them staring at him through the bars of his cell. The eyes hovered just above the floor, unblinking, fixed on him. He screamed for a guard, but by the time help arrived, the eyes were gone. The strange thing is, other prisoners reported the same eyes, always in the same hallway, always at the same time of night. Guards tried cutting the power, thinking it was a trick of the light, but the eyes glowed even in total darkness. Story 15. The Black Dog of Huntsville Prison. In Texas, the Huntsville unit is known as the place where executions are carried out, but some inmates fear something worse than the needle. They call it the Black Dog. It appears in the corridors late at night, a huge animal with glowing teeth and matted fur. It never makes a sound. It only watches. One condemned man swore that the dog sat outside his cell the night before his execution. He prayed and screamed until dawn. When the guards came to take him away, they found claw marks gouged deep into the floor beside his bed. Legends say the dog is a collector, watching those whose time is nearly up, waiting to lead them away. Story 16. The Dead Cellmate of Marion Prison. At Marion Federal Penitentiary in Illinois, 2 inmates shared a cell in the 1980s. One of them died suddenly during the night, his body carried away by guards. The surviving prisoner was left alone, but by morning he begged to be moved. He said his cellmate had never left. All night he heard him breathing. He heard him shifting under the sheets. At one point he said the man leaned close and whispered his name. The guards thought he was losing his mind. They refused the request. A week later, the inmate was found hanging in his cell, his body swinging just inches from his dead cellmate's empty bed. Story 17. The Screaming Pipes of Sing Sing. Deep under Sing Sing. Prison run tunnels and pipes that carry steam and water through the facility. Maintenance crews hated working down there. They said the pipes screamed. At first it sounded like normal pressure, but if you stood long enough, the noise changed. It became human, clear voices crying in pain, calling for help. One worker said the voices begged him to turn the valves and let them out. When he refused, the pipes shook violently, hot steam blasting through cracks until he fled. No one goes down there alone anymore, not even the guards. Story 18. The Silent Cell of Angola. At Angola Prison in Louisiana, one solitary cell is known as the Silent Cell. Anyone placed inside it stops talking. No matter how loud they were before, once the door shuts, they go silent. One inmate who survived a week inside said he felt as if something was pressing on his throat. Every time he tried to speak, invisible fingers wrapped tighter. He could only whisper. By the end of the week, his voice was completely gone. Doctors said it was psychological, but the man never spoke again. He spent the rest of his life mute, his eyes wide with fear whenever someone mentioned Angola. Story 19. The Bloodhands of Cook County Jail. Chicago's Cook County Jail has seen thousands of violent deaths. Guards there whisper about the Bloodhands. One officer said he was making rounds when he saw handprints smeared across a cell wall. They were bright red, dripping as if freshly painted. He opened the door to investigate. The prints vanished before his eyes. The next morning, a prisoner in that very cell was found dead. His body had been slashed across the chest, and his own bloody handprints covered the floor. Story 20. The Endless Footsteps of West Virginia Penitentiary. Inside the massive stone walls of the West Virginia Penitentiary, footsteps echo long after the halls are empty. Guards describe hearing boots marching in perfect rhythm, as if an entire line of soldiers was walking past. But when they look, the corridor is bare. Inmates claimed the same thing. Some said the footsteps always stopped right outside their cells. Then silence, then a deep breath, as if someone was standing there watching. During a tour, a visitor recorded the sound on her phone. You can hear it clearly. Heavy boots walking, then stopping, and then a whisper so faint it is almost inaudible. A voice saying, "Still here." Now you have heard 20 true horror stories from American prisons, and the terrifying part is this. These are only the ones that have been told. Every prison has its shadows, every prison has its screams, and every prison has its secrets buried behind stone walls and steel bars. So I'll leave you with one question. If you were locked up for just one night in any of these places, do you think you would survive until morning? Tell me your answer in the comments below. And do not forget to subscribe to Appalachian Murmurs, because next time, the darkness only gets deeper. Bye-bye.